Hello, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hope everybody's having a good Halloween Eve.
Solid ween.
You will learn more about why he has a sign that says Happy Solid Ween behind him soon.
Hello, friends. Sorry, we're getting the finishing touches on all the things.
Yep, we're getting everything finished up because we actually have a bonus episode tonight.
Rip it.
Yep, the the emotes work. I just heard Kirk yell "Rip it."
Rip it.
Thank you so much for the gifted subs, man. Appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoy
Rip
the new. I keep hearing you say "rip it."
Do a little dance.
It's making it hard for me to rip it.
Rip it.
There
Rip
it
it.
is. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so what's the one with the us doing the oi?
Rip it. That was a new follow. New
Okay.
follows are oi, 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 oi. So at the end of an episode, we were leaving and we were closing it out. That's why you hear the music starting. And I believe it was Josh at the time cracked open a beer, and I told him to rip it, like rip it and sip it.
Yeah, he did
'cause
it
he was
very
being
loudly
obnoxious.
on mic.
Yeah.
It's definitely a choice.
So it's a beer opening is what the noise is.
Yeah.
It's not a fart.
With a bonus of our Todd's intro music, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. We would never fart on our show.
Definitely not.
Mm-mm. We've never done that in history.
And that's why Twigs has used Kappa twice. She definitely does not believe you. I guess because you exposed her to one of the old clips of just fart takes. No, and that's why when we told you that we didn't, well, I don't even know what that emote is. When we told you that we didn't send you a fart mic, now you know that there are fart mics. Because to get that
they
kind,
exist.
like that kind of,
This is one of them.
yep, that kind of clarity on a recorded fart requires proximity. So hope everyone enjoys that image. And now we'll start figuring out what we need to do. Oh, let me hit record on Zencaster because we're good there, I think.
Oh yeah, I did explain you introing the show with your
Yep.
names.
Yeah, no, I saved Min and Zach for the end. When I got real close to the end, I was like, okay. It was like a full year, though, of me making up. It was all because at one point I said, bring in sexy Zach. And then I was like, I should do this every episode. Zach rhymes with a lot of words. But I started running out of ideas. And I started having digging really deep. So I was like, you know what? We're going to just call this thing. And so I just ended at the end of the year. Yep, Zach Sabbath happened for sure.
Pretty much anything that has the word black in it.
Yeah,
That's not derogatory.
Zach in the saddle again.
Or back. Yeah. You said Zach to the Future a few times.
Yep, because there's
All of
multiple. Yeah, there's multiple Zach to the Future movies that I had to mention each one.
That's a comic strip right there for us. Twigs, we gotta get on that. Zach to the Future. And it's Zach going to the future.
That is
what reason? I don't know yet.
Yeah, no,
We'll
this
figure
is
that out.
this is not a very well developed comic strip so far.
And we're just going off the title.
All right, we're recording over here.
All right.
I think we're good.
For you guys that are in here early, we appreciate it, for one. And for two, we do have an extra episode that we are going to record tonight, and that is going to be our Solid Ween special. And we will do that one at the end. So there is some hype, and we're building it, and it's going to be great. It's going to be fun. It's all Halloween discoveries, and we're going to dress up. I think you guys already know that, but it's a surprise. So don't tell anybody else.
But yeah, we're gonna have a special, and you'll learn why he keeps saying "solid ween" and why it's written behind him. He had to make his daughter do that, and she said it was stupid, and she's right.
She's like, Daddy, are you sure this is what you want me to write? I'm like, yes. She's like, why? I said, cause. And she's like, but it's not funny. I'm like, yes, it is. It is funny. I swear it's funny.
It's funny if I tell you it's funny.
And then I'm like, cause it's not hollow, it's solid. And she's like, oh, okay, I get it. It's still not funny.
I
I
understand
said,
it, but it's
and
terrible.
I'm like, it's ween like wiener. And she's like, okay, you're 12 years old. Actually, I think she says I'm an 8-year-old, but yeah,
And how old is she?
she is 12.
That should hurt you deeply. Being called an 8-year-old by a 12-year-old.
uh, children, it's fun to embarrass them. Are you seeing wavelengths on your side on the
Yep. I
Zencaster? Okay,
see wavelengths for both of us.
okay, because I see none on my side for me. Uh,
Yeah, no, it seems fine. Yours are a little like low, but that doesn't really matter. High is the problem.
all right, so we're gonna start with the PDS, and we're talking about heavyweight.
Yep.
So
I think we're all good. Hopefully it sounds good. They're responding to things we're saying, so that's a good sign.
yep, does the audio sound good on y'all's end? God, I'm gonna have all the burps again. Dang it, dang it.
Kelnick
All right,
put a heart cat, so I'm guessing that's good. I guess that means it's
okay.
good.
Let us start this thing. Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast we recommended last week. And at the end of this show, we're going to recommend a brand new show, and you're going to go out and listen to it. And then we're going to talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we are talking about a show that I've listened to every single episode of, Heavyweight. And it's hosted by Jonathan Goldstein. And it's such a good show, man. It's so funny, but also like there's some heartfelt stuff there. It's a great show. Essentially the premise is Jonathan will find somebody, and usually it's somebody that has this really compelling story and they've lost touch with somebody else, or a group of people, and he kind of goes, investigative journalism deep dive, and he has to try to find that person and reunite them. So a lot of times sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's amazing, sometimes you want to cry because like they haven't talked to each other in forever and they're so happy. But that's what the premise of the show is.
Yeah, and Jonathan Goldstein actually started as an author, but has since worked on shows like Heavyweight. Honestly, is probably his biggest one at this point. It's a very popular show. He also worked on This American Life and Wiretap. But yeah, he had a career in radio for a while, and he had quite a bit of time working on writing as well. He had a debut novel called Lenny Bruce is Dead, and then he basically had a couple more novels, and he was published also through New York Times, and then something called Saturday Night GQ, and the National Post. So he had a pretty varied and established career, but then he moved into a pretty cool show called Heavyweight.
Yeah, so he's the host of the show, and it's a Gimlet show. So it's funny because he's always like making fun of the owner of Gimlet, or the CEO or whatever, because they're old friends and they both used to work on This American Life together. And but one of my favorite things about the show, and it's a through line through all of them, is that he always gives a phone call to his best friend, who is a nurse, and her name's Jackie Cohen, and he usually trolls her, and then she ends up like at every single time she ends up hanging up on him. Like that's the thing. She'll usually say something snarky and then hang up on him, and it's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell pretty much immediately that it's going to go that way because he says something ridiculous. He starts
Yeah,
out just saying something ridiculous, and she's like, "No, this is bad."
yeah. He starts talking about, because she's a nurse. He's like, "What do you call the big toe as a nurse? Do you call it the great toe, or do you call it the big toe?" And then he asks about if they call it, the pinky baby toe, or do you call it the little piggy?
Yeah, he did ask if someone had an accent if the little piggy got smashed, like if she would say that to him, and she's like, "No," and then she hung up.
She's like, no, how are you employed? And then she hung up on him. It's so funny. And it made me think about something that my son said when he was like 4. He stubbed his big toe, and he said that he hurt his thumb toe. And from then on, I have always called it my thumb toe because
He's
it's
not
great.
wrong. It is his thumb toe, kind of.
So that's my contribution to that conversation is thumb toe should be a thing. Let's get it trending on Twitter. Let's get it going.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to get that trending for us on Twitter, but yeah, it's important.
Our giant army of listeners.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah. So this specific episode is about 4 kids that take a 240-mile bike ride through the Adirondack Mountains by themselves, unaccompanied by any adults at the age of like 11 and 12. And it's a crazy story, and it's great. And it actually kind of gets a little bit emotional near the end because when they start uniting and stuff. But what do you think about the show, Zach?
I really like the show. I don't think I'd listened to any of it before. So you told me the premise of essentially that it was Stand By Me, but on a bike ride type thing. That's what it seems like to me. As soon as it's like
I've
4,
never seen that movie.
well, it's a coming of age story. 4 10-year-olds, 10 to 13, I think they said they were, going on this grand adventure cross state, doing something that probably would not be allowed for kids. Like literally, would you let Leah do this?
No, freak no. Like Jonathan mentioned, as a parent, it gives him ridiculous anxiety. But thinking of as a kid, he would love to do that, and that's exactly the way same with me. Like thinking of it for my kids, hell no.
Yeah, I
But
get that because it's kind of crazy to just let them off into the sunset on some bikes.
but as a kid, I would have loved to do this.
Yeah,
I would have
no,
done this in a heartbeat.
I probably would have, but I feel like I would have died. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I would do it wholeheartedly, but that I would die with that same enthusiasm. But yeah, they take off on a. They're going to, what is it? It's their uncle's house that lives in Vermont,
Yeah.
and
So to give a little bit of backstory, the kid's name's Jonathan as well, Jonathan Marshall, and apparently his parents, specifically his dad, is just like this hippie 70s dad, like all about just the laid back hippie kind of life, which is great. It sounds like he was the fun dad. He talks about like in the summer, he would ask his son, he'd be like, hey, it's late at night and it's real hot. How many of your friends do you think you can get together so we can go get some ice cream? And he would like pack as many kids as they could in the van just to go get some ice cream. Honestly, it reminded me of like high school and my dad, because we would always go and do stuff with my dad. We'd go on trips. We'd go to dinner all the time,
Mhm.
and he just loved hanging out with us
he did.
when we were in high school.
No, and
And
this definitely reminded me of high school. My parents obviously, like, we were way too dumb to have been let out of the house like this. But high school is when apparently I was just the right amount of dumb to be let out of the house sometimes. And so
I
yeah,
think
that's
we were
when
smart enough to hide how dumb we were. I
Yeah,
think that's
maybe.
more of what happened.
maybe they just were around us less and they forgot how dumb we really were. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But yeah, it definitely reminded me of that. But yeah, then essentially the two best friends that lived, I think, in the same street and still live close to each other, because eventually this steps out. So this is grand story, and then it steps out to where are they all now. And so two of them lived on the same street, but then two young boys just showed up and like were coming to stay at the house. And they're like, what are they supposed to do while we go on the trip? And they're like, oh, they're going too. So two random kids also get thrown into this.
Yeah,
And
and
so-
Jonathan was actually mad. He's like, "No, man, I've got only so much beef jerky. They can't come. I don't have enough cups of noodles. This isn't gonna happen." And they're like, "No, they're going with you." So that's the way it went.
Yeah.
So
and-
these two brothers, Jimmy and Mark, ended up being a tag along, and we find out later on why they ended up having to come live with the family. And but yeah,
Yeah, so basically they go on this, I think they said it took them 3 days of riding all day, and then they would land somewhere at night. The first night they stopped at what do they call it, Frontier Town? Yeah, Frontier Town. And so it's like a Western themed town. And
Sounds like a tourist trap, like in the mountains, just like it probably is.
yeah, it probably is. But for a 11-year-old, you're like, oh my God, this is the best trip I've ever been
Heck
on.
yes.
And
Heck
this is
yes.
all told through, it's John, right? Isn't John like
Yes,
the lead?
Jonathan's the one.
He's
Yeah.
telling the story of basically this whole adventure. Well, he's at least the first person that talks about it. And then they go to the frontier town. Then they hit a bunch of terrible weather. They have a bunch of crazy things happen. They remember amazing little details of the adventure, like going to A&W, and his friend took off his shoes, and he said that it is still to this day the worst smell he ever smelled.
Like stinking up the whole restaurant with his dirty, wet, gross 3 days of in the rain leather shoes. Yeah, it was a great detail.
But yeah, this is one of those times where like we could run you through every awesome thing that happened on their story, but it's a lot better to hear them talk about it. So if this sounds interesting to you, you can hear them talking about all the little details, and it's cool to hear because they definitely do remember and hold close to them kind of different random points that happened. Different little things that happened along the trip meant stuff
One of my
differently.
favorite things is they actually did it. They actually made it to the uncle's
made
house. And the aunt and uncle come out and they're like, "Why are you here?" And they're like, "Your dad said you were doing it, but we figured you were going to call us halfway here and we were just going to come pick you up." And they just automatically assume there's no way they're going to make this.
I would assume that
And,
too. I'd be like, okay, just have the car ready. We don't know when it's going to.
And also, I really liked the impact that this had on pretty much all of their lives. Like you said, it's like a coming of age moment, and it really was. Like even for Jonathan, the main character in this story, he talks about how it almost like gave him a determination to not give up and to just keep pushing through stuff. And he became a lawyer and all this other stuff. And when everyone thought he wasn't going to be able to do it, I thought that was a really interesting to the story.
Yeah, one of the things that really caught me as like they were talking about it is how differently each one of the four perceived it. Each one of them had a very different experience kind of in their memory of the trip, and then also how that impacted them moving forward. Because the neighbor, I cannot remember his neighbor. Were they both named John?
Jonathan and John.
Yeah, so the neighbor who was there, not the main storyteller, but his
Jonathan
neighbor friend.
and John, hosted by John Goldstein.
Yeah, there was a lot of Johns going on.
So many Johns.
But he basically doesn't remember any of it. He doesn't remember any of the details. He remembers making it. He remembers going on the trip. But, okay, which one? Jonathan's the storyteller, the first one, right?
Jonathan's the storyteller. Uh-huh.
So Jonathan
John's his best
remembers
friend.
like tiny details, like what they ordered at the A&W when they got there, and like all the random hills that they were on, and like the weather,
The
and
headboards at the frontier place.
all of this stuff.
Like
He remembers it so vividly. And John, it's more just like, yeah, I remember we did it, and like, but that's kind of it. Because then I think that he kind of just got into, he was doing concerts. He was, I think, the oldest out of the group, so like he was right at the age of being a teenager, and so he was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that was a fun trip and everything, but he moved on like as a person quicker. And then the whole kind of premise of Heavyweight, if I'm gathering this correctly, is it's making lost connections essentially happen. You know, it's tying up loose ends of life.
It's not hardline that, but it's almost every episode is that.
So in this one, I think Jonathan and John talk fairly often, but
I think they're still friends.
They had never talked to Jimmy and Mark since taking this trip. So that was a crazy thing to imagine. Is just your kid, you go on this crazy adventure, formative thing, and then you lose touch with them completely for 45 years. Like, kind of mind-blowing to think about. And so that's where the payoff of this show really comes in, because you're like, then you start to think about like, oh, what would it be like to do that? And then obviously Jonathan Goldstein goes out and he said he had to make hundreds of calls to try and find these people. And
I love how he had bits and pieces of those calls. They're like, no, there's not a Jimmy or a Mark that lives here.
Yeah.
You know?
But he found them. He found both Jimmy and Mark. I mean, because he found Jimmy, he was able to find Mark because they were brothers. But essentially, then you get into what is maybe equally as interesting to me is kind of
Mm-hmm.
how this impacted everybody differently. Because, like, I believe Jimmy's the one that was in Vegas, or he was in somewhere west, and then Mark was the Florida teacher.
Yes, I
Because they
believe so.
were
I believe
they were
so.
brothers, and they eventually told you that the reason that they went on this trip is because their mother got MS and Parkinson's at the same time,
Yeah,
and
she was
literally had
getting
to
very sick.
she had to quit work, and she had to essentially be at the hospital all the time, and it essentially fractured their entire family. And the father apparently cracked and like completely abandoned them, and they still don't talk to him. And that is why they were sent to this house on that trip. So there's so many random little like life elements throughout this thing that you're just like, this is so crazy for like a 10-year-old to experience. And there was even a little bit of animosity between Jimmy and Mark, the brothers, because like just everything that happened with the family, it sounds like just kind of shattered everything. Jimmy said that literally this was like the only good summer of his childhood.
Yeah, it was pretty heart wrenching, to be honest. I mean, and a lot of his stuff's out of their control. And the thing that stuck with Jimmy, and is so sad in a way, because he of course he remembers the trip and he thought it was awesome. But the thing that he remembered even more fondly was spending time with John and his family, like hanging out with them, just seeing a family dynamic that was working, and just you know spending time with parents that he was never able to really enjoy.
Yeah. And so it really does come back to all of this really kind of deep human stuff. These emotions that everybody can kind of remember a little bit, feel a little bit. Because yeah, Kirk talked about when we were in high school. That's when we kind of felt like we were going on these adventures. Because at one
Yeah,
point they started thinking about it, and they're like, you know what I miss was the freedom, just the complete freedom of everything. And I thought about that when they were talking about this entire story. And it's like, when was the last time you felt like that? You know, that like that high school or being a kid feeling of just nothing.
I thought about that today. I was like, what did I ever have an experience similar to this? And I think the closest one would have been that road trip that we went on right after high school, when we went to what, Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, or the like the trips to Roxanne's.
Yeah, yeah.
Those trips that we took were kind of it, because we didn't have any plan really aside from just going to a place, and it was just hanging out. And so it is a very like kind of special moment in your life to have that kind of freedom and to feel that just winging it idea.
Yeah.
And I don't know. They just talk about so many things that you're like, wow, this. So basically, the story that starts out like just this coming of age story, and it's insane that it happened. Like, it's insane that a bunch of
Yeah,
children rode their
it
bikes
was
200
in the
miles.
paper. His uncle was like, "Well, heck, we need to tell the paper about this." So the paper came. They took pictures, and it was in the local paper. And of course, they bought a bunch of copies. And John still had copies of it, and he sent them to all of the guys, because apparently Jimmy and Mark had been telling people about this story, and most people didn't believe them, because they didn't have any proof of it. And so now they have proof of it. So now when they tell people, they may be like, "See, I've got a paper. It says I did it.
Yeah.
There's my picture."
And one of the like the most like hit home moments of this, really that's what this show is about, is kind of, it reminds me in a lot of ways of like This American Life and really great shows like that, where you start to see a pattern forming, but then they really can't execute like the finale of it, where it's like, oh wow, and then it like wraps it. And when they all got their pictures, you could hear like almost like childlike excitement come out in their voice. And then then Jonathan Goldstein connected everybody on the phone, who literally they hadn't talked to in almost 50 years. And you could hear them kind of like get excited about it. They started getting a little bit giddy to
You could
talk to
hear
these
the
people.
nostalgia, dude. Like you could hear it in their voice.
It had a really great payoff for kind of like everybody getting to like reconnect about something that was so important to all of them. So I really did enjoy the show. It's that perfect balance of like, it's funny, both the host and like the story was crazy, but then just the emotional tie-in at the end is just, it makes it really great.
So, like I said, I've listened to every single episode of Heavyweight, and it's weird because he names it usually a person's name, so you don't know what what the story's about when you listen to it. He always names it after a person's name. And it's funny because a lot of podcasts you want to pick and choose. You're like, okay, this looks interesting. This doesn't. I'm not going to listen to this one. I'm going to listen to this one. This show, I just trusted it. And every single time it would get me, man. And I'm looking at some of the other episodes. One of them was great because he had his friend whose name's Gregor. And this dude, he was such a dry humored, hilarious, but like it seems like he would be obnoxious to be around guy. And apparently he always felt he felt jealous of Moby because it was his friend. Apparently he grew up with Moby, the very famous artist, or,
Yeah,
musician.
the Moby. And not that
Yeah,
there's
the Moby.
there's one Moby. There's no name what I mean Moby Dick, but other than that there's no other reference to Moby ever. It's just
But
Moby.
like apparently Moby came out with an album that had a lot of like how would you call it? There was a word for it. It was like folk music mixed with like African folk music and stuff like that. And apparently Gregor let him borrow that album. And then Moby basically sampled the whole album and made his biggest album ever from it.
Really?
And what Gregor wanted is he wanted that album back because Moby never gave it back to him. And so they travel all the way to Moby's house. Moby has no idea why they're there. And there's this whole like thing. And it's so funny.
Did they end up talking to Moby?
Yeah, no, they end up going to his house, sitting down, and of course, Jonathan Goldstein's hilarious, and he called himself like the mediator, but he's had some weird like Jewish name for it because he's very Jewish and he's always playing into it. It's great, and it was just such a good episode. That was one of my favorites. There's a list of like the top 10, but this one was cute. There was one. It was called Beverly and Van. And it said Beverly's granddaughters wanted to know why she always spoke about Van, a man that she loved platonically, but supposedly not romantically. And then he has to and both of these people are dead, but both of their grandkids remember their grandparents talking about each other. And it's such a cute story. And they end up finding almost like love letters, but they were just like best friends, but they almost, became, more than that. And it's a cute story. And of course it's so much digging because both of these people are deceased and it's just going off their grandkids. I mean,
how you even form a story around that is mind blowing.
I'm telling you, it's great storytelling. Jonathan's humor is so dry and fun. There's not even that much of it in this. And it's peppered in throughout the stories. It's not like a comedy podcast, but that's what I see from it and I appreciated from it was that.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't call this a comedy podcast. He's just a funny person. So sometimes it's got some humor to it, but it's not like a comedy podcast.
But yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if anybody hasn't listened to it, you should, because Heavyweight is a great podcast. And trust me, any episode,
just go for it.
Just listen to it. You'll like it.
It's definitely great. I will be recommending that for a long time. So for next week's recommendation, I feel like all of us need a little bit of uplifting. 2020 has been something. It's been a very interesting year.
Ooh.
And it's time for an uplifting one. Just because it's 2020. We're all living through it. We're all in it together. Let's try and live our best life. So
we're all in it together alone.
Yeah, we're all alone together. So I found a show. I'd heard about it a couple times on Reddit because every once in a while people throw out just like one of these posts essentially saying, okay, I need something. I don't feel like my mental health's not great. I don't feel great. I need something to listen to that'll pull me out of it. It's a fairly common request on the subreddit. Actually, it's interesting, but
just on the podcast subreddit.
Yes, and so what they a lot of times recommend is a show called 10% Happier, and 10% Happier is originally a book, and the book is written by Dan Harris, and Dan Harris was an ABC News anchor who literally traveled to the Middle East after 9/11. Who did all of this stuff to try and become the best news anchor he possibly could, and then he had a panic attack live on air on Good Morning America. And so literally it caused him to re-examine his entire life, and he went down this journey of self-discovery. He kind of explains it from like mega churches to shamans. Like he just went on a journey of self-discovery to try and be happier. And that is exactly what his show is about. His show is about trying to be 10% happier. And essentially he talks to a bunch of people who are very influential in meditation and trying to think positively to try and positively affect your life. So the episode I'd like to recommend is, and it felt like just very topical for right now, it's episode 295, How to Be Grateful When Everything Sucks. So I felt like that pretty much wraps up how we all feel. So
yeah, and I think we all could use an episode like that, a discussion like that, a podcast like that, where it's just kind of refocus. How can I be grateful during this unprecedented time, as everyone likes to call it?
Yeah. The novel coronavirus is getting us.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm excited to listen to that. I'm excited to have some more strategies on how to be grateful during this time, because everything does suck right now.
It does.
And when this comes out, it'll be right after a very contentious election. So
we'll
I don't
need
care
it
what
even
side
more.
you're on, we're going to feel probably just gutted no matter where you're at. So this is something else that we're going to need. It'll be very timely.
Absolutely. All right.
And remember,
there's always more to discover.
I gotta pee.
Okay. It's good to know. Hey, what's up, Scott? Good to see you.
Scott.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording. I'm hoping it doesn't knock us out of this thing. I think it will. Yeah, we're just going to take a quick 2-minute. Yeah, Scott, and that's kind of what I was thinking when I saw the title of this. I was like, you know what? I do feel like being grateful for what you have is how you don't get pulled down the rabbit hole of like self-pity and woe. So yeah, we're going to take 2 minutes, get everything reset, and it's time for the Other Discovery Show. We will be right back.
Welcome to the Other Discovery Show, the podcast that's not about podcasts. It's the bonus show from the Podcast Discovery Show, and it's about all the other things we discovered throughout the week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach, and I discovered this week part of why the grapefruit is so weird. Because it's one of those things where, okay, first question, do you like grapefruit?
With a bunch of sugar on it, yes.
I feel like that doesn't even count at that point. Yeah, no,
I
feel
know.
like that's like the traditional, like, my grandparents used to always do that. They'd cut open, and there's a special spoon for it. There's a grapefruit spoon.
Yeah.
And yeah, you murder it with sugar and eat it like it's an ice cream. I don't know.
I like it with the sugar.
Yeah, it's
like,
it's very bitter without, honestly. It's very bitter.
By itself, ooh, no thank you.
But yeah, Atlas Obscura had a cool article about grapefruit, and I learned tons of stuff. So, and a lot of people also know, but if you don't, it has weird side effects on certain medications. Like if you're on certain medications, you cannot eat grapefruit at all. It's like no grapefruit for you. You're on heart medicine or something. So that's weird. But then basically it just kind of gets weirder. So it's just wild. So it starts out with kind of explaining where all citrus comes from, because pretty much all of it came from Asia. All of the versions of most versions of current citrus came from Asia originally. So, and I mean, literally it's saying 5 or 6 million years ago, one parent of all citrus varieties splintered into separate species, probably due to some change in climate. So 3 citrus fruits started: the citron, the pomelo, and the mandarin. And so
it's pomelo.
Pomelo?
I'm just kidding.
Is it pomelo?
That's the way my dad always said it, but he was probably wrong.
I have no clue. I've heard pomelo, but I don't know. But basically it just went all over the place. There was some weird ones. There's apparently a caviar-like Australian finger lime, which I'd never heard of.
I've had them.
It's very odd looking. It does look like it's filled with like caviar or something.
It looks like it's about this big. It looks like almost like a pill-shaped fruit, and inside are these tiny,
Here,
not really tiny, they're small, but
I'll throw a link here in chat so people can check it out.
small, like basically capsules. It seems like of lime juice,
It's almost like
essentially.
if a pomegranate were a lime.
Yeah, but there's not a seed in the middle
Yeah,
of
there's
that.
no seeds, but that's one of a
It's
weird one.
fancy.
But those three main like citrus types are like the thing. But pretty much all of that was crossbreeding between those. So like mix pomelos with certain mandarins and you get sour orange. Cross that sour orange with a citron and you get a lemon. And so eventually everything that we have now is some variation for the most part of those three types of trees. But then there's grapefruits. And grapefruits were in Barbados. So that's not Asia. That's weird. And they found it in the 1600s was the first thing they found out. So apparently the first parts of this were all mysterious. Citrus trees have been planted casually by Europeans all over the West Indies, with hybrids springing up all over the place, and very little documentation of who planted what and which mixed with which. So there's no real way to be able to track all this, but it naturally hybridizes when you have two varieties near each other. So essentially, there's a chance that it just randomly happened. But sometimes, even when they're trying, it doesn't work. So then you get to like it's weird that they didn't even at the time they didn't even use the word grapefruit. The 1830s was the first time the word grapefruit was even used. So that's like 200 years before what they think might have been a grapefruit was seen. So all of this is just like to say they don't really know how this all even started. So before that, it was probably known as the shaddock. But they said that's confusing because the shaddock was also what they used to call the pomelo. But there was some other person, like it's all over the place. And then essentially, it just kind of went from there. So there was a lot of people talking about him from Barbados and then all of those things. And then basically they called him a golden orange. They called him a forbidden fruit tree. And when they were talking about the forbidden fruit tree,
I'm pretty sure that the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden wasn't a freaking grapefruit.
There's no telling. Okay, that's a question for you. It doesn't actually say apple. It just said it took the forbidden fruit from a tree.
Yeah.
I feel like it was always like an apple. Like when they like drawings of it.
So. Yeah.
Maybe it was a grapefruit.
Jesus probably wasn't like a white dude with long flowy hair that looked like a hippie either.
I mean, I feel like that's fair to say. Yeah, I don't think he was. But honestly, like to be kicked out of the Garden of Eden for a grapefruit seems suspect. That's my only reason that I think it probably wasn't. It's the only reason I think it wasn't a grapefruit is because that is totally not worth. And you wouldn't trick both of them with a grapefruit. Somebody would try it, and so just one would have gotten booted.
Yeah.
They would be like, no, it's not worth. Don't worry about it.
He'd be like, man, we should have listened. This thing's gross. Unless we find sugar. Once we find a way to refine sugar, then I'll eat this. But right now,
not for me. That could stay there. But then you get to the name grapefruit. Like, why grapefruit? And they say that it probably comes from the fact that grapefruits grow in bunches like grapes. But there's a decent chance that's not true. In 1664, a Dutch physician named Wouter Schuden visited Barbados and described the citrus he sampled there as tasting like unripe grapes. In 1814, a British plantation and slave owner said that it was on account of its resemblance and flavor to the grape. And it's like, what type of grapes are you guys eating?
Right.
How bitter are these grapes?
I've eaten lots of grapes. I've eaten muscadines, all like a lot of different types of grapes.
Oh.
Some that aren't super sweet, but
but if and literally the next part of the article, if you're thinking about that grapefruit doesn't taste anything like grapes, you're not wrong. It's also documented that there were no vine grapes in Barbados at 1698. That means, according to one theory, that many of the people on the island would not really have known what grapes tasted like. So they guessed, and they're like, oh, is this grapes? And then they just went with it. So there's that. And it's just ridiculous.
I love how we named stuff. It's
just winging it, right?
It's just grapefruit.
And here, let's bring it to Florida. A Frenchman named Ode Philippe is generally credited with bringing the grapefruit to the American mainland in the 1820s. He was the first permanent European settler in Pinellas County, Florida, where modern-day St. Pete lies.
Heck yeah.
So yeah, apparently it was tough for him because the swamp and apparently the natives did not want him here, but it was his favorite citrus, and he planted huge plantations of it and started spreading it around. So Florida man brought grapefruit to everyone. But South Florida, being warm, was also a great place for them to grow. So Florida kind of became a pretty big thing here. And so it essentially just it took off here. I feel like it was an old-timey thing where it became very good for breakfast. It was all part of that. Like, I feel like we've read some stuff about like, oh, you need to have a breakfast, but then we've read news studies that are like, you don't need to have breakfast.
I got the biggest eye roll the other day from my wife because she said to the kids, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And I'm like, did you know? I was that guy. I get it. And I deserved the eye roll. I'm like, did you know that's actually not true in any way whatsoever? It was an ad campaign done by breakfast companies. Yeah, and she didn't appreciate it. But I taught my kids something.
Yeah. So, okay, now we get to why it has weird interactions with medicine. Well, and maybe the better place to start is here's how they found out. They were taking, essentially in 1989, they were working on a blood pressure drug called felopidine or felodipine. I don't know. But basically, they were testing this and they were trying to set up a blind control. So they were having people drink like water and everything like that. And so they tried a bunch of stuff and they got to the very end of it trying to figure out like if it did anything. And they said, we got a can of grapefruit juice. And essentially, they made a cocktail with grapefruit juice and alcohol, and the control group was just grapefruit juice, and there was a slight difference in blood pressure between the group. But then you looked at the amount of drugs in their bloodstreams, and the levels were 4 times higher than I would have expected for the doses they were taking. This is true of the control and the experimental groups, and the only thing they could figure out was the grapefruit. It apparently has a high volume of compounds called, I'm not even going to try. I've butchered so many words today. I'm sorry, everyone.
Do it.
Phenocoumarins?
Yeah.
Which are designed to protect the fruit from fungal infections. But when you ingest it, it's so many. I shouldn't have even. The phenocoumarins take your cytochrome P450 enzymes offline. The grapefruit is powerful, and those cytochromes are dunzo. So this, like, basically, your body size throws up its hands and starts producing an entirely new set of cytochrome P450s. So it apparently shuts down a normal process of your body.
I'm completely following you.
Yeah.
I swear.
So basically, it shuts down a part of your body that you need to be working because of some weird thing that the grapefruit has as an antifungal in it. But literally, here is some of the medications that get messed up. So Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, a lot of like, what is that? Is that anxiety medications? I think so. Amphetamines like Adderall and Ritalin. Anti-anxiety drugs like Zoloft or Paxil. Cholesterol drugs like Lipitor or Crestor. ED drugs. So if you're on Viagra, no grapefruit for you. Various over-the-counter medicines like Tylenol, or Allegra, or Prilosec, and then 100 other drugs.
Did you say Tylenol?
Tylenol. No, and it's like there are some of these that have the potential to kill you. So kidney failure, cardiac arrhythmia, gastrointestinal bleeding, respiratory depression, all of these things because you ate a grapefruit.
This is like, I'm learning the grapefruit may be the most dangerous fruit in the world.
It is.
If you combine it with medicines.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And like, it's one of the last things they have on this. I won't go through anymore. I'm sorry, this went longer than I thought, but just, it was a nonstop list of like, what is happening with this fruit? Like, why does anybody eat it if it can potentially kill you if you take a certain kind of medication? But one of their last things is there's nothing inherently wrong with the fruit, but grapefruit drug interactions are something everyone should know about. And yeah, that's true. So basically, if you take any medicine, don't eat grapefruits. This is the PSA. Just don't eat a grapefruit. It's not that good. Like, Palomas are terrible. Like,
go get a tangerine, dang it.
Yeah, just there's better citrus out there. Just ignore it.
Well, on a completely same level scientific discovery that I have. Kanye West got Kim Kardashian a hologram of her dad for her 40th birthday. To be honest, though, this is an article from Popular Mechanics, and it actually talks about like hologram technology, but it makes fun of the fact that this was the gift that he got.
I
Kim
mean,
K.
it's odd.
It looks disturbing and creepy and scary, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all. So it's I don't know. It's crazy, but he had her dad say, "I am so proud of the woman that you've become, Kimberly, and all that you've accomplished.
Oh, they like
All of your not handwork, all of your hard work, and all of the businesses that you've built are incredible. But most impressive is your commitment to become a lawyer and carry on my legacy." I didn't know she was going to law school.
she's going
But
to law school right now.
I don't know. That's what her dad said.
I haven't been keeping up with the Kardashians.
I have not been keeping up with the Kardashians either. But yeah, there's video of it, and it's unsettling, to say the least. But they do talk a little bit about like hologram technology stuff, and I didn't know that one that they did for Tupac, like what was that at Coachella?
Yeah, it was Coachella a while ago now.
Which it did look cool. I mean, it looked real-ish. That thing cost $10 million, and it was 4 minutes.
It was not worth that, I'd say.
It was 4 minutes at a concert, and it was $10 million.
That's too much.
Plenty of the other dead celebrities have joined Robert Kardashian and Shakur in coming to life in recent years. There was a Michael Jackson hologram who played the 2014 Billboard Music Awards. I remember seeing that one. A controversial Prince hologram who stole the halftime show at the 2018 Super Bowl. I don't know if I remember that. I think I saw it, but I don't remember it.
I don't know if I saw that, but that seems. When did Prince die? Was that the same year?
I don't know.
Like, because that's a little too.
I remember when he was. I remember when he did the Super Bowl. Was it?
Yeah, no, that was legendary.
That wasn't a hologram though.
No, Prince actually did the Super Bowl
with his penis guitar. It was great.
It was phallic. It was phallic. No, but that wasn't a hologram. That was Prince.
No, that was him. Yeah. Anyway, and even an Amy Winehouse issue that one. Even an Amy Winehouse hologram. That's a project that is underway right now. It's going to be part Broadway production, part concert.
What?
I don't know. It's an interesting article.
The thing is, there's
about. I will say this: it's exciting to me because it reminds me of like Star Wars stuff, and I think that's awesome.
I think that holographs are awesome, or holograms. What do they call them? I don't know.
Hologram.
But I think it gets into that same issue that like I think it was Star Wars and Disney was getting into. People are having to start write in their contracts when they're a movie star that you can't use them after they're dead. Because literally, Star Wars did that with a couple people. They like CGI rendered people that are dead, and so it gets into this weird ethical world.
Didn't think about that, about the ethics of that.
Yeah,
because who's getting paid for that?
Yeah, not
I
them.
Did not think
They're
of
dead
that before.
And like that's also why people freaked out about Tupac, is because they essentially just use like Tupac's image to do like this weird publicity stunt thing at Coachella. And it's like kind of a weird thing to just take somebody's like artwork and their live performance, their appearance, and just like replicate it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Without consent.
Now it feels icky. No, but what I'm thinking of is in the future.
Yeah,
is like,
voice calls with Darth Vader.
Yeah. Like,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. We can call each other in hologram form. It'd be so cool.
No,
we could like send a message in a hologram. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be like Skype, but it'd look better. And so there'd be like a person in the room. My
dad lives somewhere where I can't go visit him right now. And so the only thing we can do is FaceTime. And it is funny because he has Alzheimer's. So every time he sees me on the phone, it kind of blows his mind. And he gets excited every time because he's like, oh, this is so cool. I can see him and talk to him real time because
Yeah,
that wasn't something you could do before.
that
So
wasn't
yeah,
something we
I
could
mean,
do in high school.
that's what I'm saying. Literally, this was almost something you couldn't do before he went in there.
Yeah,
Like it was around, but it wasn't as prevalent and easy as now.
yeah. No, and so that's the thing. It's essentially one of those. It's all over the place because I think there's cool stuff that you can do with holograms, but at the same time, will it get squirrely? Yes.
All right, I guess we're taking a break.
I was about to say, does that count as a discovery? You say there's so many things, just play it. All right, discovery, everybody. Play Death Stranding. That's the one with Daryl from Walking Dead, right? What's his name? Norman Reedus.
Yep. The answer to article or you can save it is yep.
I think she was responding to me, Kirk.
I know. I'm just messing with her. Yeah. No. Save it so that the time that you can come on here,
Yeah, save it.
you have one.
Yeah, no, definitely
ready to
save
go.
it.
Because that does sound.
I would love
Perfect.
to learn more about that game, actually.
I also want to play that game. I haven't played it. It looks stunning. The premise seems crazy. I heard Kelnack playing it, and the fact that there's like 40-minute cutscenes, which I know is notorious for that game creator, is I think that's the stuff that's like, man, like I love story stuff. That's a lot. That's like a movie.
Yeah, it is like a
Cutscene.
movie. Yeah, if you skip a cutscene that's 40 minutes long, I don't know what you're doing. Like they clearly wanted you to have an experience here. Okay,
All right, we got 2 more discoveries. We are 18 minutes in, so it's going to be perfect timing.
should be good.
Because you talked about grapefruits for 15
I know.
minutes.
I felt bad, but literally, there's just so much information in that. No, my other one's really long too. Maybe I should switch it to the one that's less long than that. I have a one that I could pivot to.
This is so, dude. Ads are weird, man. Ads are weird. I just read that article about Kanye West and stuff. Now I'm on a different website with a different discovery, and there's an ad for that article.
They really want you to read it again.
I just read it. That's what I'm saying. Is like a lot of times it's like, dude, I've got that tab open. Why are you advertising that to me? Anyway, ready for your discovery whenever you're ready. Are you pivoting
were
to
you
your
wrapped?
shorter one?
Yeah. Do you want me to do the shorter one? Because
Yeah, no, I'm done with hologram.
And
Kanye,
how's your
whatever.
last one? Is it one that's like shortish?
It's very short. It's the blue B one.
Mm,
It's pretty short. I think you should do your long one. Do the one that you were gonna do,
okay.
because mine's really short.
Okay. You got it. So today, literally, this article came out on Wired. We have spent 20 years in orbit on the ISS today. So, like, I don't know it's necessarily today, but it's been 20 years now. And essentially, it runs
the
through
birthday?
the whole list of the crazy stuff that has happened here. So, the first kind of planning for it started in 1985. They're running experiments on how to do life support on low Earth orbit. You know, this is
1985.
85.
Wow.
And it took a lot of planning because essentially we're talking about a permanent, semi-permanent space station that's in orbit. So like that seems like kind of normal now because it's been happening for 20 years. Humans have been living in space for 20 years now because of the ISS. There's constantly been at least one person there. So essentially they started in 85 trying to plan out. You start with the basic things of like life support and how to make sure that people are okay and how to figure out how to make it modular so that you can always be adding new cool stuff to it.
Yeah, we need to study this. Like I just now I've always been fascinated by the ISS, but I don't know a lot about it. Like what did it look like when it first went up there?
The first
And how much have
modules
we added to it?
of the ISS, a Russian cargo module called Zarya and a US module called Unity that serves as the dining room were launched in 1998. So we're talking that's what 13 years from when they
We were
first
10 years
started.
old.
Yeah, they first started planning this stuff, and then 98 they launched the first thing. And then less than 2 years after that, so essentially it started out as 2 rooms. And then 2 years after that, so in 2000, Bill Shepard and Russian cosmonauts Sergei Krikalev and Yuri Gizhenko, I have just picked ones where I have to read things I can't read. Gizhenko blasted off from Russia's Cosmodrome on a 2-day journey to the station. And they stayed for 4.5 months, and that began the uninterrupted human presence in low Earth orbit that's still happening right this second. So over the past 2 decades, more than 240 people from 19 different countries have visited.
240 people? I didn't know that. That's so many.
And not only did they finish building the station, but they've conducted pioneering science experiments that have changed our understanding about biology, because they essentially found out that a ball of bacteria can survive in space for 3 years. They've figured out, like, there's a ton of science that's come from this. So there's an entire article, like, at some point I'm going to have to just link some of this and you guys can check it out, because there's so much. That was one of my things about this too, Kirk, because I was like, I have always been, like, fascinated by the fact that it's there, but I had no idea how much stuff was going on constantly.
I bet you money there's an investigative podcast about the ISS.
If there's not, everybody close your ears, because we're doing it.
TM.
Yeah, TM.
It's ours now.
We said it. It's our show.
If you say TM after you say an idea,
it's a verbal
legally
trademark.
Binding. So don't steal our idea.
Yeah, so don't steal our idea. We're going to become billionaires because of that amazing idea. Because literally...
Because that's what happens to podcasters.
Yeah.
They become billionaires.
Yes. No, but it's essentially just like this crazy thing. So they have tested, like, starting fires in space. They've started all kinds of stuff. They've played music in space. They've taken amazing photos of Earth.
I love that music video from space, from the ISS.
Yeah.
I forget that guy's name. We talked about him before.
That's Hadfield, right?
I think so.
Yeah, Chris Hadfield did Space Oddity in space, right? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically, the first decade of it was just trying to build it into what it is now, because it's, like I said, it started with just 2 things, and now it has turned into be longer than a football field and 16 different modules. And it's housed up to 13 people at one time, although typically it's 3 to 6 members.
Man, 13 people have been up there at one time? I'm learning a lot right now. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah. And the last major modules, there was one called the Tranquility node, which generates oxygen and recycles water. And there's one called Panoramic Cupola Viewport, which I'm assuming is kind of an observation tank. Those were both added in 2011. And I believe we're about to send some people with SpaceX, like, very soon. I don't know if it mentions this in this article, but I think it's coming soon.
We just spent the new toilet, remember? We talked about that like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, no, but they've spent billions of dollars on this so that essentially we can run these awesome experiments in space and have this collaborative international space station. And so basically 90% of what's happening here is testing. It is testing how things interact in space, because we don't have another way to test this aside from the ISS. So basically they send up supplies for people, but then they also send experiments. So they grow things up there, like they've grown barley for beer. They've created fireballs. They've messed around a little bit with manufacturing, because
they've made space beer.
Yeah, they've messed around with manufacturing, because there's some fragile type of glass that could really improve the performance of undersea cables, but it's so fragile that being in no gravity situation is even better for it. But one of the craziest ones, and just like a bonus, that's my problem this week, is I keep finding these things that there's a million different tangents I can look down on, like what's interesting. But there's something called organs on a chip. So the point of this is to eventually eradicate animal testing and expedite drug discovery, because they use 3D cell tissue models called organoids, and they are able to test these things on that instead of on anything that's alive. So it really comes into, like, we could be really pushing medicines and things further, faster, and more ethically by not having to use anything that's alive to test. So basically, it's just this whole amazing breakdown of 20 years of doing awesome stuff in the International Space Station.
Okay, so our job we've gotta discover a podcast that breaks down the history and the stories of the ISS.
It probably
There
is
has to
already
be.
out
I
there.
bet you there
Has to
is
be
one out
there.
there. There has to be. There's a podcast about everything. And so there's a podcast about podcasts. It's called the Podcast Discovery Show.
It is.
But no, we've got to find it. That's our mission now. My mission now is to find a podcast about the ISS, and I'm excited because we are going to find it.
No, I think it's going to be fascinating because all they're doing up there is experiments.
Because now I want to learn more about this thing. All right, so my last discovery for the week is they just rediscovered a rare blue bee that has lived in Florida and was only recently discovered in the first place. God, this article starts with insect researchers are buzzing in Florida this week over the rediscovery of the blue bee. A rare little creature thought to have gone extinct shortly after it was discovered. So it was discovered in 2011, and then they didn't see one at all after 2016. So they thought they were just gone. It's a calamintha bee, but it's been spotted for the first time since 2016, and it lives in let's see where it was. It lives basically near the beach. I'll read this real quick. What's the timestamp on this?
29:31.
I'm going to start going analog and printing these things out and highlighting what I want to read because I always lose what I wanted to read. This bee is a hyper-local species that likely evolved around an isolated patch of sand dunes along the central Florida ridge, according to Jarrett Daniels. They hope to figure out exactly how many of the bees live in the area. So basically, it lives near the sand dunes, and it specifically eats like a specific plant that is also endangered and slowly being like eradicated from the environment. So that's kind of what their issue is they don't. It's almost like the panda. Isn't the panda the one that only eats
bamboo,
and that's like it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that. But I just thought it was fascinating that this bee, specifically that it's in Central Florida, right where we live, and it's a blue bee, and it has now been rediscovered after they thought it had gone extinct.
I feel like there's been a lot of that. That's one of the silver linings to what is 2020 is there's been a lot of animal species that when everybody had to stay inside emerged. But yeah, I think that's all of our discoveries for this week. But thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we will talk to you again next week.
Bye, guys. Have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Not you guys on the stream. You can hang around because what's coming up next is our Halloween special. And then as soon as we're done with that, it's time for some video games.
This is Solidween. This is Solidween. Solidween. Solidween.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break so that I can explain to you what Solidween is. And we can essentially share some Halloween discoveries with you. We'll all explore that together. So probably about 2 minutes. I don't think we're going to switch anything up, so shouldn't have any technical difficulties, and we will be right back. Thanks so much for checking out the stream. We really appreciate it.